Alright, guys, so the meltdown is here. The global economy is in turmoil, including the United States. Now, by now, we should all realize that Trump is very serious about his tariff war. Now, the auto tariffs came out of nowhere, and he said it will be a permanent measure. And as such, we can expect this to literally shift global markets to an enormous degree. Now, we could literally see the EU, Canada, and Mexico deindustrialize to a significant degree. Now, while the obvious conclusion is that the US will reindustrialize, realize that it comes at a big cost. Dracula might steal the life of others, but it's still the undead, and the sun is starting to come up. US core inflation is back on the rise. Core PCE has risen to 2.8% above expectations of just 2.7%. And this is just in February, where Trump imposed an additional 10% tariff on China only. Now, just wait till we get to March. We have a barrage of tariffs from 25% on Canada to the China increase and the auto tariffs. Inflation could continue to rebound higher and trigger a bigger shock to the US economy. Now, why do you think the stock market suddenly fell by 3% yesterday? It's because higher inflation is kryptonite to the US consumer, and there might be more downsides coming in a month again. The S&P is set for the worst quarter since 2022, and the tariffs haven't even trickled down into the real economy yet. The big correction in 2022 was triggered by the rise in interest rates, and history could repeat itself again. This time, it'll be Trump's trade war to blame. Now, won't be surprised if we have another 10% or 15% more downside to go. US stocks are very overvalued still, and we cannot forget about any Fed or Trump put to save the day. Now, everyone is still discounting how serious the trade war is. Trump is saying that he wants to make trade fair to export more stuff, but the real agenda here is to reshore manufacturing. And that would mean US consumers will be the one footing the majority of this reshoring bill. And it's not like they're flush with cash. Real consumer spending increased by 0.1%, but it missed the estimates of 0.3%, which is actually a big margin here. Retail spending is weak in February, and we could see a serious contraction when the March print comes out. Now, I wish I could say that we are out of the woods here. It's not fun seeing stocks go into the red, but it would be really disingenuous to say that we are in the clear. Trump himself is the wild card, and his crazy man act is really freaking everyone out. Now, if there's one definitive alert flashing, it's the Federal Reserve's own GDP forecast. They are estimating that the US economy will contract even further in Q1 this year. This quarter, the GDP now estimate predicts that the US economy will contract by 2.8%. It's crazy that the Atlanta Fed has to justify the contraction is due to the purchases of gold skewing the numbers. And this tells us that we are probably going to see a very big negative print in Q1. We are halfway towards our official recession. And if inflation continues to rise, we'll be stuck in stagflation. I really hope Trump just comes out and embraces the collapse. There's really no point in hiding the obvious at this point. I really hope he doesn't pull a Biden and tries to redefine what a recession is. But if he does admit the contraction, I think the markets will fall down the elevator chute. Another 5% tumble or even 10% probably is on the cards very soon. Now, in April, the king of the world is going to slap a 25% pharmaceutical tariff on all imports. So medicine prices are now at risk. Will this drive prices higher or drop prices down? Very simple question. Now, the last time I checked, drug companies in the US are for-profit entities. They prioritize making money instead of keeping prices affordable. Now, it's really tragic for people with health issues, and on a macro level, it puts upwards pressure on inflation as well. But Trump either doesn't understand this or he doesn't care.
It's also exciting because of what's happening with other aspects. We're going to be doing tariffs on pharmaceuticals in order to bring our pharmaceutical industry back. We don't make anything here in terms of drugs, medical drugs, different types of drugs that you need, medicines. It's in other countries, largely made in China, a lot of it made in Ireland. Ireland was very smart. We love Ireland.
Now, in 2024, the US imported over $200 billion of pharmaceuticals, and I hope Trump doesn't think that he would be punishing China, because that's not who will really suffer. China exports less than $10 billion worth to the United States, and there will be two big losers here. The first will be Ireland. Their exports could start to collapse. And the next biggest loser, undeniably, is the American people. And if you have a loved one that needs medicine, chances are their costs will be heading up. This is just brutal. Tariffs don't hurt just the economy as a whole, it hurts people's budgets and their livelihoods. Pharmaceutical tariffs is a line in the sand where things just get cruel. Now, if we take a step back and observe on a higher level, it's not good for the US economy as a whole either. It reinforces the chance of a recession coming. Now, drug makers, they have been front loading their shipments to the US, which means US imports have actually been rising. The trade deficit might be worse than we all think. When a country imports more stuff, it actually works against their GDP numbers. Money is spent overseas instead of within the local economy. And you can't blame people for rushing for cheap medicine. While the US braces for impact, we need to talk about the next victim of the trade war, and it's none other than America's ally, Japan. Now, when Trump launched his auto tariffs, it affected much more than just the Germans. Japanese automakers got hammered. Now, stock prices across the board crashed. Toyota fell by 4%. Honda, which gets half of their revenue from the US, also fell. Mazda plunged by 5%. And once again, this is a clear sign of Japan's big dependency on the US, not just for defense, but for their export based economy as well. And like Germany, Japan is going to face the inevitable. Deindustrialization is going to come for them when their domestic inflation is already rising, so it's a double whammy. And if Trump doesn't do a U turn, he could literally doom Japan into recession. Their GDP growth in 2024, Japan, was 0.1%, so there's literally no margin for error anymore for the Japanese economy. Now, in 2024, the US imported more than 240 billion in vehicles. Just after Mexico, Japan is the next biggest supplier to the US. They sold nearly $40 billion worth spread across 1.4 million vehicles. That's an incredible amount of money. This accounts for 28% of Japan's total auto exports. This is a nightmare because automakers were very used to selling into the US, which is a protected market from Chinese cars. Japan won't be able to suddenly reroute their supply to other markets. I mean, seriously, where are they going to sell to? Asia, Latin America, and even Europe, they are swarming with BYDs. And when we say that Japan is trapped, it's actually an understatement. There are likely only two routes left for them. Either Tokyo watches their automakers ship production to the US and with them a ton of jobs, or they have to remove the tariffs on US goods. Now, Japan imposes heavy tariffs on certain US farm products. While the net total is just 3.2%, certain categories have big import taxes on them, over 200% for rice and 23% for meat. Now, Japan can try to remove those, but will it be enough? They could offer to buy expensive food from the US, but my guess is that it would only offset the reciprocal tariffs and not by much, though auto tariffs would still be in effect. Now, if Trump really wants to reshore production of cars back to the US, he wouldn't bother about importing rice, meat, or dairy products. His priority isn't US farmers, it's bringing jobs back to the Rust Belt. So the odds of Japan getting screwed are really, really very high. And it's really sad if you hear the words coming out of their prime minister. The level of regret is through the roof. We invest in the US, we provide employment, and we pay the highest wages. We are the largest investor in the United States. It is not right to treat all countries in the same way. Well, Japan wants special treatment, preferential treatment, but they're not going to get it. That's what happens when you tie your fate to one single country. Japan, like Europe, broke the biggest geopolitical rule. There are no permanent friends, allies, and enemies. Trump has said that there will be no exceptions to the auto tariff, and we have to work on the assumption that he really means it. And unsurprisingly, we have the first group of people who are surrendering to Trump's trade war. Europe has come to the table to negotiate their terms of capitulation. They are preparing concessions to present to the staff the apprentice to get some tariffs removed. And that's how desperate things have become for the Europeans. Now, if we look at their balance of trade with the US, it actually isn't that bad. The EU imports a lot of goods and services from America. Trump's economy also buys a ton of goods from Europe, and on net, Europe's surplus with the US was only around $50 billion 2 years back, which means the US deficit with Europe is only around $50 billion. There are seriously many other countries that are making a ton of money with trade from the United States, and Europe must be in a terribly weak position to crawl back to the US even before April. And it kind of makes sense. Until they solve their energy crisis and their defense issue, the EU will still be under America's thumb. Now, this chart shows us who has the biggest trade deficits with the United States and who has the strongest backbone as well. Now, in 2024, China had almost $300 billion in trade surplus with the US. So, in absolute dollar terms, they have the most to lose. But you don't see China throwing in a towel. In fact, they are counter tariffing the US and cutting away critical exports. Even Canada is standing firm and opposing Trump, and their trade surplus with the US is just $63 billion, on par with Europe and 5 times lesser than China. And this goes to show that Europe as a whole has run out of cards in this trade war. And if I were Trump, I'll exploit this to the fullest and keep pushing Europe for the maximum concessions. But what else can Europe do? They're really in a big quandary here. It would be hilarious if Trump demands them to buy cars from Ford and GM, while Volkswagen relocates their production to the United States. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, this is what happens when you don't diversify your trade. This is the consequences of neglecting your supply chains as well. Europe is about to have a meeting with HR in Trump Tower, and JD Vance is the hiring, or should I say, the firing manager.
Europe doesn't have the cards here. As President Trump likes to say, when you have actually penalized American companies and American workers, as the EU has for years, we're actually fighting back for the first time. But Laura, we have a $1 trillion trade deficit. We absorb
largest
all
ever.
Of the terrible economic policies from all over the world, and the world expects American consumers to foot the bill for their workers and their businesses, and Donald Trump is flipping that on its head. We are not going to do this anymore. We cannot run an economy where Americans borrow, go into debt to buy things that other people make for us. We're going to make it in America. We have to.
Now, whether we believe JD Vance or not, it really doesn't matter. Vance and Trump believes this narrative. It's their justification for punishing the world. So we have to sit back and brace for impact. April 2nd, reciprocal tariffs are coming, and the world has to prepare. The USS Armageddon is about to fire away. But let me know what you think. How much further will the markets collapse? And will Trump spare Japan and Europe, or will he take no prisoners? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe. Be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.